Hello YouTube, the Eye of Stone here. I recently, at long last, got around to doing the Let's Play of the Mage Towers from Thief Gold, and one of my signature moves over the years has been to jump from nose-bleedingly high locations and then to save myself at the last moment with a ledge grab. And Mage Towers kind of this time, playing through, I was able to notice three interesting spots to challenge that in three kind of different ways. So I want to show what I did and explain sort of how I set it up and how I execute these maneuvers. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at three different jumps, and I will show you the footage of me doing it, and then I will explain how I did it and what went into that and how many attempts it took. And we're going to take this in order of the jumps that proved easiest for me to the one that was hardest. So let's just start by watching the footage of the first jump. It took me 10 attempts to pull off this jump successfully. Even though it is by far the greatest distance traveled of the three jumps in this video, this jump is also most similar of the three to the other types of jumps that I've demonstrated in other videos. But I would also make the argument that it is, of the three that I show here today, it actually is the easiest and the most forgiving in terms of its setup and execution. It's the longest, but it's also the easiest, and I'll explain why I think that's the case. So as shown in the footage, what you do is you get yourself one of those rotten crates that's in the sort of the little secret area of the basement. You carry that up the staircase to the fire tower. That's just the tower I happen to use. And you use the crate to get up onto the wall, and you come over here where the walkway leading back into the central tower sort of intersects with the fire tower, and you have this diagonal here, and you position yourself on this diagonal so that in this case the technique, I would say, is not, you don't jump from this location. What you do is you very carefully sort of just inch off of it. And the nice thing is you have this diagonal here which can allow you to adjust the angle of your fall. So, if you want a wider angle, you would go further back into this diagonal you see here on screen. If you want a shorter angle, you'd stay further up. But the length of this diagonal is such that you have options in terms of where you actually begin your fall from. You can try different angles of descent and still reach the corner of that hedge, which is the ledge which I used to save myself. Now, one thing you do have to bear in mind in any jump you make where you're using a ledge grab to save yourself, but especially these super long range jumps, is that what you want to do is you don't want Garrett to hit the ledge you're trying to use to save yourself exactly. What you want to do, and in terms of what's actually happening in the game, that could be completely separate than my subjective impression of what I'm doing, and what's actually happening in the physics of the game could be completely different. So I'm not attempting to advance an explanation of what's going on in the game here. I'm just talking about the technique I use to survive these jumps. So the way I think of it is what I should say, is that I don't want Garrett at any point to really, quote, come into contact with, unquote, the ledge I'm going to grab to try and save myself. What I want to do is that I want it to be a situation where I jump off the height that I'm going to fall from, and I get the angle of my facing right, and I start holding down that space bar, so that when Garrett, on his way down, right at the end, passes near that ledge, if I'm depressing the space bar, he is close enough so that he will be able to successfully grab that ledge and then pull himself up and save himself. Because, clearly at these distances and at these speeds, you can't if you glance the edge, sometimes on rare occasions, from a fall like this, not really, but if the fall is a little bit less than these, if you get glancing blows, sometimes that'll take out half your health, and the landing fall might take out another quarter of your health. So it is sometimes possible to, the point I'm making is, if you glance off the ledge you're trying to use, you are either going to die or you're going to take damage. You don't want to take damage. You don't want to die. And for this jump, glancing blows are deadly. The other two, not necessarily. But so you have to be, the trick to this one, I would say, is simply being at the right spot relative to the ledge you're trying to grab at the right time, and to have that space bar facing down. Now, in all of these jumps, you sort of have to have chosen the right angle of descent from your starting position, but it's useful to go more into that. It's useful to look at the other two jumps I did. So let's move on. Okay, so the central tower in this level, you reach the top by way of two separate tall staircases with a void in the center of them. And this, what you just saw, this is the lower of the two flights of stairs. Now, so this is basically the highest point you can jump from to the lowest point you could use as a ledge to save yourself. The difference here, and what made this one more difficult, it took me 17 tries to pull this off successfully. The difference here is that you have a much longer horizontal distance you have to travel as you fall vertically, so that when, again, at the last moment you come near to the flight of stairs on the opposite side of the room, you are again in position to grab that ledge and save yourself, but not run aground on it and get yourself killed. The issue I ran into with this jump is that in a bunch of my attempts, I was actually able to grab and mount the ledge, and that command to grab, because I had the space bar depressed, was still continuing to execute itself, even though Garrett was dead. So the trick to this one is not just getting, or another way, a better way maybe to put it is, you have to modulate you have to modulate at what rate you're going to be traveling horizontally as you fall vertically much more carefully in this one. At least that's the way, that's what made this particular jump more difficult for me. Now, would another player have exactly that same type of problem? Not necessarily, but in my case, it made the jump more difficult for me than the previous one. And again, in my awareness, I won't say I was thinking about it, but in setting up the move I would use to get off of the ledge and begin the descent, I really had to be aware of the horizontal distance I was going to travel in addition to the vertical distance to a much greater degree. I think that this particular jump could be completed either by inching off the ledge at a certain speed or by a very carefully executed hop, if you will. So actually pressing the space bar to jump off, or some combination of the W key and the space bar, or depending on how far back you went, just by pressing the forward key or the forward creep key, which with the Thief default binds is S. The Thief Dark Project binds, that is. So let's move on to the third jump. So this jump takes place in the further up of the two staircases, right before the room where the Earth Talisman actually is. It took me 25 attempts to pull this jump off, and this jump is very similar. This jump, I look at it as kind of, it's got elements of both of the first two jumps in it with a real twist. You know, the actual horizontal distance you have to travel as you fall might be more similar to the first jump than the second. You are going from staircase to staircase, so, well, you're not in this one actually. You're going from a staircase to a ledge, but what makes this jump so difficult, or again, what made it difficult for me, was that you have the two stone blocks on either side of you. So you can only set yourself up in, one direction. But at the same time, those also kind of act like guides. The threat here is traveling too much horizontal distance too soon, and the fact that you have to go from the columns you're between when you take off to in between the two columns when you're ready to grab perfectly, because it's those two columns on either side of you that will really kill you when you're trying to grab the ledge. It's an annoying angle. I guess if you could call it Y. The Y angle is annoying because there's a big risk of overcompensating and going too far horizontally too fast, although Y, see, I'm making it complicated. I'm word salading this. The columns on either side of you are a big pain, both when you're departing and when you're trying to come in for a landing. Let's leave it at that and say that that's why it was harder for me, if even that makes any sense at all, which it probably doesn't. So Thank you for watching, and because I am a show-off, I will replay all 3 of the jumps, and I will see everybody back next time.